This here is a piece of a bush-hammered walnut tree that this video is about. A dining table is to be made from it, with all the cracks being filled with black epoxy resin. And here you can see damn well where the challenge lay in this piece. It was very badly twisted and the bush-hammered bumpy areas also gave me a headache. In the beginning I thought, okay, it won't be that bad. It's not the first time I've done it. But later I had to dig deep into my bag of tricks. So first of all, the whole thing is now roughly prepared with the electrical planer. The area for mounting the base frame I had to get flat, so I worked partially with a router here. I worked out the corners that were particularly twisted with a hand plane. After planing it looked like this. Now it was time to clean the cracks, for which I used chisels, knives, brass brushes and sandpaper. I also sanded the affected areas first before casting, so that no traces of processing can be seen under the resin later on. I then primed the underside, firstly to consolidate the bush-hammered areas and secondly to avoid ugly stains when I pour the black epoxy resin afterwards. And this is what the whole thing looked like after priming. And here is the top side, which is still being primed. And that is now be done here. And now, somewhere in this phase, I have realized that it doesn't work like that. Some of the corners were already so thin that I had to come up with something to get the tabletop more or less even later on. Then I decided to cast 3 of the 4 corners with transparent resin, which worked out very well. And after about 2 weeks of applying epoxy, both the underside and the top, every evening the whole thing now looks like this. Before I can continue, I have first to remove all the masking tape, that means the adhesive straps, the silicone, the wooden parts, etc. And that is one of the least beautiful jobs to do. I also used an angle grinder, in Germany we call it flex, with a rust disc for this and then immediately continued with the side shaping. Now I could continue with the main milling work. I had to be very careful here and mill slowly and very carefully so as not to provoke any tears in the resin. And so the start has now been made. And the milling continues. In the meantime we have made a lot of progress and the whole thing now looks like this. Then I continued with the side shaping. After the flex rasp, what is the first step normally, I usually use the hand plane here. When I roughly sand the sides. And yes, this is unfortunately also part of it. It can sometimes drive you crazy. I often had to repair faulty resin areas. This is the view now before the actual sanding work begins. And here you can also see the casted corners very nicely now. Now it's a case of sanding again and again, which took a few days. I used various belt sanders, random orbital sanders and of course sandpaper by hand in the end. The whole sometimes drove me crazy. In the end I even resorted to shellac. When sanding, I also constantly moisten the wood surface with water, so that the fibers stand up, which I then break again with the sanding. This also makes the surface smoother and more beautiful, and it's better to do this with water as later after oiling. And sometimes it got quite late in the evening. And now we have almost reached the finale. This is the view just before oiling. Now it's time for oiling, and I can only hope that I have sanded well enough beforehand, otherwise you can now see all the imperfections. And this is what it looks like after the first application of oil. This is the top side. Well, that's something to be proud of. It looks really good. The base frame for the tabletop came from the customer himself, and after some trial and error I finally found the perfect position. Now the holes for the screws had to be pre-drilled. As the customers move around a lot, I decided to use rumper sockets for the connection. These are special threaded sockets with a wooden thread on the outside and a metric thread on the inside. Of course, hereby the holes have to fit absolutely exactly. The holes are then punched so that the frame rests firmly on the surface. As the already existing holes in the frame have been too small, so I first had to drill them bigger. And then I also removed the burr or flash here. Here you can see now the rumper sockets and the needed tools to insert them. And now it comes to the drilling process. That is really difficult as they have to be inserted absolutely correct. Okay, all are in. Lucky me, that already looks pretty fine. Now I only can hope that it will fix correctly. So if this now don't fit absolutely 100% correct, then I will have a serious problem. But it works out right. Yes, that's certain. To be sure that everything fits well, I mount the frame in advance to test it. And yes, once more, it's working, it's stable enough. As I have worked a lot with resin, I have to protect the surface especially. Therefore I use a hard wax oil. This later on will be polished into the surface, first with a random orbital sander with non-abrasive white polish pads, and maybe also with a buffing machine. It depends on what will work better. Wow, and that's how it looks now. But don't believe that this was easy. It was not like applying once, polishing and ready. No, nothing like that. In fact, I primed about 3 to 4 times with hard oil, and then I polished with a hard wax oil about 4 times. And by the way, in the end I had to restore the surface completely 2 times, as I was not satisfied with the result. Finally the day of delivery has come, and here this beautiful table has found his new place. By myself. It took 3 days to turn out the slab.